Hello. I'm glad to see everyone's enjoying dinner, and I hope you had fun at the reception too. Last but most definitely not least, we're going to have a session with recent mayor Kevin Faulconer from San Diego, and he's going to share with us, as you can see, homelessness solutions for California, our dinner keynote. And my job now is to introduce the moderator of the session. And I'm very happy to introduce the moderator. Her name is Olivia Martin. She's actually a graduate student here at Stanford. Because getting an economics PhD wasn't enough, she decided to also get a law degree, a JD. She's a JD PhD student here at Stanford. She is, not coincidentally, from San Diego, California. And she graduated from Stanford with a bachelor's degree in economics. I've known Olivia for a long time. Olivia was a student in my class that I taught with Steve Ballmer. She was later a TA for the class with Steve Ballmer. I think I advised your thesis. Yes, I was her econ major advisor, and we have stayed in good touch. She actually, if you were to look at a policy forum that we had 3.5 years ago, where the keynote was Governor Jerry Brown, you'll notice that Olivia was the moderator of that session as well. So Olivia's got a lot of fans here at CEPR. She aspires to help governments better collect and use data to design and implement sustainable, equitable, and evidence-based policy. Olivia led the research and analysis efforts at USA Facts, a not-for-profit, nonpartisan civic initiative dedicated to increasing the availability of government data to drive fact-based discussion. This was started by Steve Ballmer, and I would just like all of you to know, Steve Ballmer is the owner of the LA Clippers. And I am from the Boston area, so I'm going to be mentioning to him tonight that he said to me 3 months ago that the Celtics were doing horribly. And they are right now up in Game 2 against the Miami Heat. So tonight, I'm going to text Steve Ballmer. And I'm going to say, remember that thing where you were saying the Celtics were so terrible? Yeah, not true anymore. So anyway, sorry for that little digression. Olivia also helped the Ballmer Group Philanthropy develop a new portfolio of talent-related investments. At Stanford, she served as the chair of Stanford in Government, one of the university's largest student groups, and her research has been published in a peer-reviewed journal, and she was a recipient of the Anna Laura Myers Prize for Outstanding Honors Thesis in Economics. So please join me in welcoming our last moderator of the day, Olivia Martin.
Thank you, Mark, for, as always, a very nice, if not maybe over-the-top introduction. I've known Mark for a long time, and I know he'll get great joy from sending that text to Steve. But it's my pleasure to now introduce former Mayor Kevin Faulconer, who served as the 36th mayor of San Diego, California, my hometown where I was born, from 2014 to 2020. Prior to that, he served as a member of the San Diego City Council from 2006 to 2014. He was actually born not too far from here in San Jose, California, and grew up in Oxnard, where his father served as an assistant city manager. Mayor Faulconer achieved a number of things during his time as mayor, but one of his most notable accomplishments was his commitment to and success in decreasing homelessness in the city. It's my pleasure to introduce him to tell us more about his work in San Diego. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is yours. Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Stanford. Thank you, CEPR. And I had a chance to sit in as part of the last session as well. What a great group of speakers that you've had. Not just all day long. So congratulations to yourself. And somehow I made the cut, and I'm happy to be here to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we were able to do in San Diego, really some hard lessons learned. And I'm glad you gave my bio and introduction because I served a couple of terms on the San Diego City Council and then 2 terms as mayor. And I remember when I ran for mayor, all of the issues that we were talking about during the campaign, and certainly homelessness was one of them, but it was a lot lower on the issue when I remember that campaign when I first ran. I will also tell you, my last 3 years in office, I spent more time on homelessness than any other issue, than any other topic as mayor. And as we look at what's happening right now in our state, I don't care what city you're in, homelessness isn't just an issue. It's usually the issue. It's usually the issue. So the fact that you had such a great group of folks from all over the state today, I think speaks highly of what everybody is doing. But I think also the sense of urgency, and it's like, what do we need to do to help people? And ultimately, that's something that I think it's incredibly important to remember, all the different topics. We're talking about people, right? We're talking about human beings. We're talking about somebody's mom, dad, sister, brother that's on the street. What are we going to do to help make that better? And so that's the approach that I took. But again, it was one that I came to as I look back at myself when I first got elected. I was probably maybe what a lot of typical elected officials were, which is didn't know a whole lot about the ecosystem, and homelessness was somebody else's problem. Maybe it was the counties, maybe it was the states. We were doing some stuff in San Diego. But that really all changed for me. It changed for me in 2017 when we had a hepatitis A outbreak in San Diego County that hit us particularly hard in the city of San Diego and the urban part of San Diego, the downtown. And all leading up to that, as we look at homelessness, as we look at, was it the county's responsibility, was it the city's responsibility, like a lot of finger pointing. I know you talked about some of that a little bit earlier today. I said, you know what, I'm mayor. This is my city, these are my streets. I'm going to be held accountable for it, even if I'm not technically, quote, responsible, and we can argue who's responsible and whose job it is from the state to the county to the city, but we needed to do something. And so we took some pretty dramatic action. And what I might do is, I am going to do is I'll share maybe just for 15 or 20 minutes some of the things we did, and then spend most of my time answering your questions. But Hep A was an emergency. We had people dying. So what are we going to do? Are we going to have a seminar? Are we going to talk about it for months? Are we going to have somebody go out and do a study and a plan and come back to me in a year? That's not going to work. Again, people were on the street, and we needed to do something right away. And so I said, okay, we're gonna change the system. There was a lot of great ideas. And I said, we're gonna say yes. We're gonna say yes to them all. And if there's anything I can leave you with tonight, it's about taking action, guys. It's about not letting perfect be the enemy of the good. It's about taking action. And so we took some dramatic action. And we learned some hard lessons along the way. One of the very first things that we did is I set up a campground site in San Diego to say, we're going to have a place for you to come right now. And get rid of, there was tents on the sidewalk. Come in, we're going to have tents, we're going to have services, we're going to help solve this right away. But it was very clear to me that as we looked at shelter and shelter providers and others, and it was, again, a lot of nonprofit and private sector stuff, I said, there has to be a role for the city because the size and scale of what we're dealing with is not working. So let's change that. And so if you look at what we've spent in terms of what most cities spend at the time and what cities and counties are spending now, right, it's going up because it has to. Because it has to. You have to invest and you have to put the resources and you have to have the political will, as we were just talking at the dinner table, to actually do things and make a difference. So when we saw the fact that we didn't have a health and human services department in the city, that was the county, I'm not going to let that stop me from doing something to help people and to get them off the street. And so I knew that we controlled land use. I know that we controlled a lot of different things, and I could do that as mayor, so I did it. I declared a state of emergency, and we moved pretty aggressively. One of the things we did, this is a photograph. I established a series of bridge shelters. These are sprung structures, sprung structure tents with, you can see some of the housing and the cots there. But it was not just a bed. It was the wraparound services that give people a clean, safe, sanitary place to go outside of the streets. And I picked the locations myself from where we're going to put these bridge shelters in San Diego. A lot of people want more homeless services. They just don't want them right here. Or they just don't want them right there. So I went to the community and I said, we need to help folks. This is what we have to do. And I went to our private sector. I don't know if Drew Mosier is still here from the Lucky Duck Foundation. I involved the private sector as well. I said, I'm going to need your help to fund some of these. These are not inexpensive. We set up a series of 3 bridge shelters that could house 1,000 people. 1,000 people that we wanted to get off the street, again, to have a place to go. And I made a deal with the community. I said it's going to be cleaner and safer in this neighborhood with this bridge shelter than before it was there. And I said, if that doesn't work, you know who to blame, because I'm the guy picking the sites. And the city council at the time was very happy to allow me to pick the sites. Trust me, because not all of them thought it was going to work. We had some great providers. I was just this morning actually at Alpha Project, one of our main providers in San Diego with Bob McElroy and his team. They had a group from Vancouver and looking at what we were doing. I would just say as an aside, before COVID hit, we had 21 different cities from across the country to come look at the ecosystem that we set up in San Diego, with the bridge shelters being a big part of that. So we set up those bridge shelters. And as I said before, we knew that we had to act, and we had to act right away. In these shelters, by the way, it's not just a bed. It's wraparound service. We have housing navigators, match people with resources, with vouchers or HUD or whatever it is. We had place for personal belongings, storage, showers, food, all of that. We also got our friends at the county to agree that, yeah, this is actually a good thing to put in mental health services here. And so we brought mental health services in on site. And to see the sense of individuals that they know that they had a place, right? The dignity that is involved in that. It's incredibly important. Also helped, I did a little picture there of clean San Diego, because it's something that's, I think, incredibly important when it comes to what we're going to be doing in terms of your city and surrounding areas. A lot of talk in our last session about law enforcement and what is the role of law enforcement. There is a role. And I felt so strongly about backing up that commitment to the community on cleaner and safer that I created a new division in the San Diego Police Department called the Neighborhood Policing Division, whose sole focus was on homelessness and quality of life. And this became a division that men and women in the department wanted to be a part of. They wanted to be a part of because they knew that they had the political support of a mayor, and they also knew that they have the ability to make a difference right away, that they can let folks know, hey, we have a place for you to go, and we're serious about that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I think one of the discussions I heard earlier was on safe parking lots. We created several safe parking lots in our city. I picked the locations. We also had lots for RVs. But again, not just a place for you to park your car, but a place that has rules, that has wraparound services, housing navigators, and others that worked extremely well and was very effective. Also had storage centers. This is a picture of one of them in San Diego, downtown. You get a sense of the scale and size that I'm talking about. 8th largest city in the country, in San Diego. And again, a place where individuals can put their personal belongings, where you can check them in and check them out in a clean, safe, sanitary environment. I would go there frequently as mayor, and to see somebody, again, who was, has their belongings, know that they were safe. And I remember the gentleman that I just came across who was checking in some personal belongings because he was off to go get an interview to be a security guard. But that was his spot, and he had some stuff there, and it worked very, very well. We also worked with a lot of our nonprofit providers, and particularly our interfaith community. I think that's a shot of me doing something at some point. Not just about government only, right? I mean, we have some great providers in San Diego, particularly our faith community, and I brought them in from the very beginning. Because I said, you're going to have a partner now and somebody who's going to invest the time, effort, and energy to be successful. I know one of your panels earlier talked a lot about housing. Do we need more housing? Yes, 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 and yes. and we better darn well make it easier to construct housing. I don't know if you got into the CEQA reforms or anything like that. Okay, so we need CEQA reform. But I can't do that as mayor. But what I did do, I took the CEQA as flawed as it is, and you can tell where I've come down on this. I did a citywide CEQA. We called it Complete Communities. It says you can come in and we can build the housing by right with a permit. We did a CEQA thing that took us about 1.5 years, 2 years to do, and you can come in and actually make that housing close to our transit corridors where we want it to happen, extra density, a lot of other things, providing that incentives. That Complete Communities program in San Diego is working dramatically well. We need to do that exactly, by the way, statewide, California, because CEQA is used as a weapon to stop good quality projects that they need to be done. That's not the topic, but I care strongly about that. Housing alone isn't just it. I mean, as I said before, you need to do so many other things as well. And we did a lot of training, a lot of work on job training and counseling, and part of those job training services, again, at our bridge shelters because they were so important. So back to what is the one solution? There isn't one. It's all of the above. Our safe parking lots we opened. Never had those before. These shelters, the bridge shelters that we put up, again, at public expense and private dollars, we started that. Our storage centers, got those up and running. Our cleanup crews and our homeless housing navigators, all about action. If you wait to get a committee to do something about should we do a shelter? Should we do tiny homes? What should we do? You're going to talk about it forever and nothing's going to happen. That political will becomes very, very important. As I said, not letting perfect be the enemy of the good. And that was something that I felt very, very strongly about, and it was from those lessons of HEPA. And because we care about people enough not to let you die on our sidewalks. That's what it comes down to. And I believe that every human being has a right to shelter. I also believe that when we provide that shelter, you have an obligation to use it. And I enforced that obligation as mayor in San Diego, and it worked. And I'm going to show you the little video and a story on something about that. But again, you have to take action. Little point in time count, we were the only big city in California where we reduced homelessness by double digits. The unfortunate reality is it is skyrocketing across our state right now. The unfortunate reality is some of the things I've talked about have changed in San Diego. Our own city is starting to creep back up, unfortunately. But you can see there, I think we put Seattle, San Francisco, and San Diego on that one. Los Angeles is not on that because the graph wouldn't make it. It's too big, unfortunately. That's the reality. But back to that, back to the fact that you have to have a plan. You have to connect with people on the street. You have to give them the support. You have to give them those consequences for not following that support. And I did that. You can't shy away from that. And you got to make sure that your focus is always on housing. It's always about how do we get people off the street into the shelter. We call them bridge shelters because it's a bridge. It's a bridge from the street to that apartment of your own. And I don't like to get sucked into, is it housing first, slogans and all that. It's about how do you get people off the street now? How do you get people off the street now? Because folks are in the water, right? The analogy some folks have used, I think it's just great. Someone's in the water, they're about to drown. Do you go up to them and say, hey, wait right there, I'm going to go build you a boat, and I'll come back? No, you throw them a life preserver. You get them out of the water. That's what we need to do in California in every city. We got to get people off the streets now. You can't wait. That's why I believe that the Bridge Shelter Network was so important in San Diego and why it allowed us to do some of the things that we needed to do there. Let me go back here. So we spent a lot of time, as I said, connecting, supporting, and housing. And there was I'm really glad I saw part of the last session because that outreach is incredibly important. You have to connect from people on it, and should it be caseworkers? Should it be social workers? Should it be our police department? Yes. Yes. As part of our neighborhood policing division, every time that our men and women officers went out, and by the way, it was, we're out with the khaki pants and polo shirts, right? Because impressions are important. We're here, it's like, hey, we're here to help you and do good things. But every time that our folks went out there, there's like, I have a bed for you. Nobody ever got enforced on or anything else who didn't say no to a clean, safe shelter bed. That, I believe, was incredibly important in why we did what we did. And why that carrot, if you will, and the stick is so important. Because you have to have standards, and again, you want to have help people. And for some folks to say, it's just not okay. It's not okay to let somebody kill themselves doing heroin and meth in front of your house, in front of your business, underneath the freeway underpasses or overpasses. We changed that. Again, why? Because we care about you. And so back to that, we have the obligation, I believe, as public officials and leaders to provide that shelter. We do. It's not inexpensive. But again, if we want to help people, it's absolutely essential. I'm going to show a quick video here of one of the success stories, just a great individual. His name was Brian.
Drugs have always been a big, sad part of my life, And I was on the street, and I just couldn't get myself out of it. And living on the streets got comfortable after a while. You had the Christian folks feeding us every day here and there, places to go, and then you just got satisfied with living on the streets and showering in trash cans and roughing it. And for some reason, I got satisfied with that. And I got my jaw shattered. Someone from behind took a pole across my head, and I was like, "You're gonna end up getting killed. You're not gonna be around in a year or two." It wasn't until the city did some kind of outreach to certain people that were always in trouble, and finally they found me, and they found me easier because I chose to go into the bridge shelter. And now, and eventually, I got chosen for this great apartment here at Zephyr, and that's been just a dream to me.
Very cool. Home sweet home. And thank God my servant in the Navy got me this place. So happy here. This is my kitchen. I kind of did a color theme. Just got a lot of the books out of this impacted color, so you can see.
Very nice.
Just a different.
I like all the stuff you put on.
Country's all out.
I cannot believe every day I wake up, and I have my own place, cooking my eggs and hamburger this morning, showering, and actually took a bath with Epsom salt this morning.
A person of character lives with integrity, is honest and reliable and loyal.
Thank the city of San Diego for not for putting up with me on those years on the street, and for all the homeless outreaches that helped us while I was on the street, and Pat and the bridge shelters for what they did for me, getting me to the next level where I'm at now. Now I'm ready to take the next step, maybe to go into peer counseling or help other people. Whatever God's got for me, I'm ready for it.
Such a great guy and powerful emotion. You saw the place that Zephyr, and I'll never forget the day that I met Brian. Because I was going out to the opening of Zephyr, and it was a Motel 6 that we converted from Motel 6 to studio apartments for formerly homeless veterans. We have one of the largest veterans population in the country in San Diego. Darn proud of that. And I vividly remember I'm waiting there. Start the opening ceremony, all the type of things that mayors do, and I see him walking out before we started. He's making a beeline towards me, and he comes up to me and he points at me and he says, "Hey, you're the mayor, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "I just wanted to say thank you." I said, "I appreciate that. I think this is going to be a great place. We got a chance to tour it. It looks." He stops me. He says, "No." He says, "I want to say thank you for cleaning up the tents underneath the freeway." He said, "I was one of the people living in those tents. And as you can see there, he got addicted to substance abuse, methamphetamine, lost his job as a construction worker. But because we intervened, because we said it's not okay, we care about you, brother. You need to go to the bridge shelter. We're not going to let you sleep in a tent underneath our freeway underpasses in San Diego. He did. He went to the veterans shelter that we had set up, got himself clean and sober, and you can see that he's a peer counselor and really just phenomenal, great guy. But letting people like Brian stay in tents, doing heroin, meth, fentanyl, all of the other things, the associated violence that goes on, domestic abuse, that's not who we are. It's not who we are as Californians. It's not who we are as folks that really care. And that's why I think that became so important to set up that bridge shelter network that says we have a place for you to go. We're not going to let you kill yourself out here on the sidewalks. And I felt very strongly about that, very passionately about that. And when people saw that was beginning to work, when people saw that not only were people in the shelters, but they're getting the help and they're transitioning out into that apartment, that's why you saw those numbers go down. Still a lot of work to do. Do we still have homeless issues in San Diego while I was mayor? Of course we did. But we set up a system that says, here's what we're going to do to help you. And that's why it was so important to make that change, and that's why we did everything. Back to neighborhood policing. We're so proud of our men and women officers because they get to know people on a first-name basis. And no, they don't have to be on the first stop. But I'll vividly remember what one of our captains told me. He said, Mr. Mayor, he says, neighborhood policing doesn't have to be on the front lines, but we need to have a bottom line. And that's incredibly important when you come to the safety of your city and when you come to what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept in terms of drug use and other things that are happening out on the streets. It's not the thing that I believe that we should accept. And we took a stand against that. And it worked. And the shelters and the network that had that really, again, were that beacon that said, hey, we have a place for you to go. Didn't allow tents on the sidewalk my last 3 years as mayor. That's how serious it was. Didn't do it. Said because there's a place for you to go. You have to provide that place, right? Can't do that if you don't provide it. And so other cities are arguing about should we have a shelter or not. If you don't provide it, you shouldn't be doing anything. So back to that right to shelter obligation to use it, which I think is so incredibly important. Just a few stats, and I'll pause here in a second. We'll do some questions. But again, everything that we tried to do was to say treat people with dignity and respect. Give people options. Have standards and enforce those standards in your city. But all of the things that you saw from our parking, safe parking lots, our storage centers, all the other things, that took a lot of investment. We spent money that was never on any line item budget before, and it certainly wasn't there when I first started running for mayor. And we were up in Sacramento a lot. I know we had some of our legislators here trying to get the then Governor Brown, who you interviewed, more involved, and I think we did a pretty decent job as mayors starting to set that tone that says the state of California has to be involved, has to do this. The problem is that big. There's a lot more that we need to do. We had 3,000 people that we connected through apartments during those bridge shelters. During the Clean San Diego efforts, I'll kind of skip over that, but it was a sustained effort in terms of how your city looks, how your city is clean, how your neighborhood's in pride in that. Spent a lot of that. It was 7,000 tons of trash were collected by the end of 2020. And the fact that we had 3,000 people during that time, and then during Hep A, when we during COVID, when we opened up our convention center, transferred folks into permanent supportive housing. That's what I'm talking about when we're talking about a system that says, I challenged all of our folks. I said, when I walk into a bridge shelter, I want to be able to know that our providers know who every person is and what is preventing that one person from getting that apartment. What do we need to do? Why isn't that person in an apartment now? And when you look at it from that perspective, then you break it down because everybody's different, right? Nobody has the same needs. Everybody has a different story. But back to if you don't talk about it in terms of numbers, you talk about it in terms of an individual, then you can connect people to the help and the support that they need, that I think it makes it very, very successful. So let me just, I'll shoot to the end here. I don't know that we had all of the right solutions, but these are some of them that worked for us in San Diego. Again, really set the tone that living on a sidewalk is not an acceptable option, and we need to provide help and support that gives you the ability not to do that. You got to take pretty dramatic steps to build more housing. You cannot just say, no, I don't want it. NIMBYs are all over. I don't care what city you're in, right? Again, just like homeless services, everybody wants more housing, just not right here. Right here. So you have to have those policies that actually do it to make it successful. And we passed that, by the way. We passed that, I think it was a unanimous vote on the city council. And again, you treat people with dignity and respect because it's everybody's son and daughter. That everybody has a story, just like Brian, right? But at the same time, I think if you have that political will that says business as usual isn't getting it done, then you will get the public support to try some of the things that we tried. You will get the support of individuals that are out there on the street who knows that there is help and support from them. Then you will get the support from your community members, your small business owners, your neighborhood folks that say, hey, if this is an approach that you're taking and is it working, I'll actually support it. I'll support another bridge shelter if I know you're serious about what the character of the community is going to look like and you're actually helping people. So to me, that becomes really the ecosystem that you want, but most importantly, it provides results. And if you have that political will, if you're not afraid to let perfect be the enemy of the good, if you're not afraid to invest dollars, if you treat people, as I said, with dignity and respect, you're going to be able, the state is going to be able to make inroads and actually make a difference. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to save people's lives. And that's what we're all here for. So thank you. I appreciate that. So it is now question time.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
take a seat.
Thank you.
All right, I know that we have some folks in the audience who are eager to ask questions, so I'll keep my questions short. But I wanted to touch first on something you touched upon in your report about, in your speech about Sacramento and having to have connections there. And in preparing for this, I was, talking with Jalu, and there was a report from the California State Auditor's Office in 2020 detailing how disjointed the state's approach has been both to funding and coordinating efforts to reduce homelessness. For example, there are at least 9 California agencies administering 41 programs targeting homelessness, which spent over $13 million between 2018 and 2020. So from your perspective and your time as mayor, how do you think the state of California could better coordinate efforts and support cities in battling homelessness?
Yeah, first and foremost, to say that the state has to fully admit that there's a proper role for the state to get involved. That it's not just the responsibility of the counties, or it's not just the responsibility of the cities. And it's not just from funding. There's so many things when it comes to, not just legislation or others, but the scope of the problem is so large. An individual city is not going to be able to handle. I mean, we were fortunate. We had some of the resources because we're a large city in San Diego, right? But we have to change that ecosystem. And again, when we started, when we went, and we were talking about when we went up as mayors to Sacramento and Governor Brown at the time, it was the first time cities had even talked about requesting direct money to help with this. So the state needs to take a role. The state needs to put up shelters. The state needs to encourage housing. The state needs to change CEQA. The state needs to do all the things we talked about mental health, substance abuse, and others, and to say that it's real, it's a problem, I need to act like it.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Another thing you touched on just then and before in your speech was this interconnected nature of mental health, public health, and homelessness. This was obviously an issue when you were battling the hepatitis A outbreak, and you've mentioned some of your work with mental health in the transitional shelters. But I would love to hear how you thought as mayor about balancing, addressing multiple issues at the same time, getting people into the shelters while also getting them the health care they need to address underlying issues, how you approach that.
It is, and look, I think you hit the nail on the head. And if I looked, I looked at the topics that you were talking about all day today. There's not, there's not just one issue that we're dealing with when we're talking about homelessness. We're talking about economic issues. We're talking about mental health issues. Yes, we're talking about housing issues. We're talking about substance abuse issues. But what I do know, back to that crisis that is happening on the streets, if you allow folks to stay there, you're not going to resolve them. Not going to happen. You've got to get folks into a place where it's, like I said, it's clean, safe, sanitary, and an opportunity where you can provide that help and the support. And that people understand that it's going to be there. And when we first started with, when we saw particularly on the bridge shelters, we knew right away that we were going to have wraparound services. But I don't think I fully appreciated when we first started it, how much the mental health factor was absolutely essential to being what we were going to be able to do. And when the county, came in and brought, they started with just some individuals on site. We eventually had trailers for mental health, for folks to come in while they were there, so to avoid some of the stigmas of, what's happening, because when somebody would see a mental health worker talking to somebody. It's not, it's all interconnected. You have to have housing navigators on site. It's so hard to have to connect somebody to that apartment or their voucher if they're out on the street. They may be somewhere else 2 days later, a week later. How do you find folks? That was part of the problem. Everybody's, Otter talks about using data. Crappy data. There's no data out there. We had to recreate it all when we got people into the bridge shelters. And then I insisted that all of our providers use the same database. Wow, crazy thought, right? Let's all talk to each other. But again, back to how are we tracking when folks come in? How are we tracking how many folks we helped? Because I got to know if I'm spending all this money that it's actually working, right? I got to be able to justify it, because there's some folks that were like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. There's too much money. I'm like, brother, we're trying to help people. And yeah, it's going to cost some money. But then I better be able to say how we're helping people. And so that's why, again, I'm a big, huge believer in you have to have all of those services on site.
Amazing. Thank you for that. So I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll open it up to audience questions to make sure we get those in. We just came, before this from this fascinating session on policing. Yeah. I know in your efforts in San Diego that partnering with law enforcement was a critical part of making your strategy work. And training police, and you mentioned that the police were really excited to be part of this. So I'd love to just ask you about how do you think that other cities can learn from how San Diego partnered with law enforcement in their policies, and what do you see for the future of police in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of cities have similar types of things, right? We had a homeless outreach team that had officers. As I said, we made a whole division out of neighborhood policing, and I think every city probably has something to that effect. But again, you have to be able to say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to be able to say, you have to have the shelter and the support, but then you also have to be able to say, and it's not acceptable, we're not going to let you die out here in a tent on our sidewalks. But if you don't have the shelter to begin with, you have no business doing the other part of it. I think that's part of legal, right? That's part of the Boise decision and others. I don't know if you got into that today. But it's morally right. It's morally right, which is to say we need a place for folks to go. And it's got to be, again, something that is going to help folks. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's a bridge. But we need bridges. We need bridges to get you off the street and into a place. And law enforcement, and to say once folks know that, hey, no, we're not going to allow tents on sidewalks. We're not going to allow tents in the canyons. A lot of canyons in San Diego, by the way, and I can't tell you how many fires and other things that were a part of that, and that's just, but again, back to who were some of the most victims of crime? Homeless individuals that were in these tent encampments, domestic violence, all the other things, drug abuse, others. So that's not, I think, something that anybody wants to see. But again, if you approach it from a standpoint that says we're here to help, and we mean it, then I think you see community support and you see public support. And by the way, this is not a partisan issue, right? This is not Republican or Democrat or independent. This is, in my view, what is the right thing that we should be doing to help people? What is the human thing that we should be doing to help people? But also, but get results. And if you don't have standards, if you don't have consequences, you're not going to get the results. And you're going to spend a whole bunch of money on stuff, and it ain't going to change.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I guess now we have some time for some audience questions. I don't know if I'm supposed to be the one picking these. All right. All right, start. You're the first hand I saw up. Oh, no, so sorry. You can go
okay.
first.
Is this on? Okay. Proud Torero, first and foremost, USD grad,
Ah,
San
very
Diego.
good. I'm an Aztec.
Working in homelessness up here in the Bay Area now for quite a long time. A question I always come up when I'm having conversations with folks is, we can pretty much figure out what it's costing us per person to work on this issue over some set period of time. We can calculate that. We
Yep.
can make an investment. We can calculate that. What I find is very compelling is being able to also articulate what is the cost of leaving someone unsheltered.
Yeah.
So per
course.
community, per municipality, having that calculation, I know it's probably not a standard thing that communities can calculate, but were you able to calculate that and make a compelling argument?
We did. We saw how many calls officers are having to use over and over to individuals that unfortunately require calls constantly. Again, part of the reason why you need to have all of those services at the shelter and have a place for folks to go. If you don't have that, you're going to send your paramedics out over and over again. You're going to send your officers out over and over again. That's not efficient. You're going to be wasting money. You're not going to be able to do crime that you should be doing, as opposed to, again, that front line of response. So yeah, and not to mention, if you don't have a place in the shelter, people are going to die on your sidewalks.
I did that quick note. In Santa Clara County in 2015 study, it was over $85,000 a year for the most chronically homeless person to be left unsheltered.
Sounds about right, unfortunately.
Thanks. Thank you so much for meeting with us today, sir. And sorry to ask, I want to ask like two difficult questions. The first one is, when you started implementing this, what was a big obstacle? Apart from like the not in my backyard and all of that, something of implementation. And also, what's one thing you regret with the program? What's one thing you wish you would have done differently or better?
I would have moved faster. I tried to say at the beginning, we had 10 encampments, we had other stuff, and we were in this, whose responsibility is, the county should be doing mental health, everybody should, who's the homeless department? Who would I go see about that? There's no homeless department, man. Wasn't in the city, wasn't in the county, wasn't in the state. Wasn't. So you got to make some of the stuff, as you go. And then, so that was the first part of your question. What was the second part? I'm sorry. I'm getting old. The obstacles, NIMBYs was a big one. And it was unproven. I don't know that this is going to work, right? And this doesn't seem like the right thing to do. I'm like, it may not work, but we're going to do something. It may not work. And I remember talking to a group. I said, if it doesn't work, we'll take the bridge shelter down, right? It worked. Was I sure? Was I certain it was going to work to the extent that it did? No. You have to have great providers helping in there. You have to have, again, back to political will that says this is how it is. I think one of the things that, because we went through what we were doing at San Diego County at the time, the public bought into, we need to do something different. But I also think that, I don't care what city you're in right now in California, and it's all relative, right, the size of your homeless population, but whether you're in Bakersfield, Fresno, Sacramento, Menlo Park, you name it, San Francisco, LA, people know we got to do something. And again, back to it's the issue, why we're here this afternoon and all day, because people know the status quo isn't working.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, I've been told. And your hand up in the back.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know you were pretty successful at implementing a lot of pro-housing policies in San Diego during your time, like you hinted at, complete communities, and I know like there's an ADU bonus and the parking by transit. I'm pretty sure y'all have eliminated parking minimums.
You've done your homework, very good.
And now we have SB 9 by Tony Atkins, also from San Diego. So I'm just wondering what's next for the San Diego region when it comes to supply side housing. I know you hinted at CEQA, and I also was wondering if you could maybe speak a little on Sandag's role. I watch KUSI News a lot, and I know there's kind of a kerfuffle, a regional conversation happening about Sandag and
You're
its
going
government.
deep today.
So,
Man. I like it.
yeah,
This guy's in the
thanks.
weeds in 1 minute before 8 o'clock. That's what you got to do. I like your style, brother. I will just say on the housing policies, yeah, and again, back to doing things differently. If you would have told me that when I ran for mayor that I was going to eliminate parking requirements for new apartments, and I'd be like, what? But let the market decide. You can take off the $80,000 of the cost of a unit. You don't allow parking. Now, it's not going to work everywhere, but if we're in a big city, it could work close to your transit zone. Let the market decide. And so, again, trying to think differently, and again, back to density, what we did on complete communities is allow you to come and build a project because we've already did the CEQA, we already did the environmental impact report citywide, right? So let's have that argument about where we want density and where we don't. But when we decide where we want it, let's make it easy so you can actually come in and build it, man. So you can come in and build it and actually get people housed. And so the problem that you see on CEQA, we had to do a citywide EIR. That took us 1.5 years, 2 years. You shouldn't have to wait 2 years to do something like that. You should be able to say, if this is a project, we need to do something, and particularly in our urban cities, it's a little bit different on environmental issues than you're talking about in other parts of the state. So I think we have to recognize that. I think a lot of people do recognize that, but folks in the legislature haven't had the political will to change that yet. And so that's in the 30 seconds that I have left. Again, it's about we did the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units, allowed you to build that. And so again, it's trying to be like smart about, yeah, we need more supply in California. We need more supply. But the government doesn't build housing, right? The private sector does. But we better ought to have those policies and those rules and the regulations that allows you to actually come in and do it. And then when we do that, I think you'll see that it's already working in San Diego. And so, it's only been in place now for, 1.5 years. So, ask me that question in another 5 years, and hopefully we're going to really be able to point to kind of the before and some of the after. So, thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Mayor Faulconer, to Olivia Martin for a great conclusion to our day. And I encourage all of you to stick around. We're going to have coffee. You can hang out. But I just also encourage all of you to think about, how can today be more than, going to the movies? We, enjoyed. We learned something. It was interesting. But if you have ideas for how any connection you made today, something that we can move the needle on this challenging issue, we're all ears at CEPR. So we welcome your suggestions, your connections, anything, because I think it's an important social problem, and I think we at CEPR are eager to help in any way we can. We are incredibly grateful to all of the people who spoke and moderated today for sharing their time and their expertise, and to all of you for engaging with us. So just anytime, just feel free to reach out to us. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And I also just want to do a few quick thank yous. First, I would like to once again thank Jalu for building to this today. Great work. I would like to thank the phenomenal events team at CEPR, Tiffany, so many people. If I try to name everyone, I'm gonna forget someone. So just thank you to all the events and everyone who pitched in today to make this a great day. Thanks to the sound team, the video team, the food, the people who have served us food all day, for just everything was spectacular. And for us, this was our first in-person event in a heck of a long time, and I'm so glad that we did it, and I hope to see every one of you again really, really soon. So with that, have a good evening, and feel free to stick around for a while.
Thank you, guys.